The discourse around football tactics has long been about the mixture of positional play and relationism, but what if there was a middle ground? In today's video, we're going to be speaking about how Enzo Maresca, Luis Enrique, and Mikel Arteta are implementing this style of zone replacement. Let's start off with how Enzo Maresca is implementing his style of zone replacement and the sort of rotations that we're already starting to see happen at Chelsea. Now, if we go into the game that Chelsea just played against Fluminense, then you'll be able to see a few examples of these interchanges. If I bring one up now, here's an example of Enzo Fernandez and Cucurella interchanging. Now, Enzo Fernandez usually playing in that higher up position, which I'll show again on the tactics board in a minute. Cucurella usually playing as that sort of left centre back or as a left back who can invert into the middle of the park, etc. As you can see, they've both vacated their sort of natural zones on the ball, and there is an opportunity for them to switch. Now, this is actually where they're returning to their natural positions. But before that, you can have Enzo Fernandez dropping into this sort of deep left this sort of deep left pocket to get on the ball and use that ability. Something we saw the likes of Toni Kroos do a lot, something that we're still seeing with the likes of Vitinha, which we're going to touch on when we speak about PSG in this video, who also implement very similar tactical ideas. But it also allows Cucurella to push forward into this area where he's comfortable, and we've seen that he's comfortable, and he can offer a various amount of different traits. Now, it's this moment that, as you can see, the markers, it can cause confusion and it can open up spaces, which you can already see in this pocket where Enzo Fernandez is going to sort of go back into, that it can open up those spaces. And as you can see, then when you go to attack, you can get on the ball and we can start to connect. So Enzo Fernandez is able to get a little bit of space, give a supply to Pedro Neto, who can then go 1v1 with his fullback. So it's these sort of scenarios. If we show another one, here, you've actually got, well, it started off like this with Nkunku deeper. So you've actually got Nkunku alongside Caicedo and Cucurella in the build-ups, basically looking like a 2-3. But then you've got Cole Palmer and João Pedro sort of cheating to the right. And as you see here, there's another moment where all three of these players, they don't know who they're marking because Nkunku has now found himself more or less in the centre-forward position. Palmer's been able to sort of drop off and receive the ball, something Cole Palmer loves to do, get on the ball and dictate. And it's going to open up this sort of ball into João Pedro in this channel, which is an opportunity. So it's these little moments that you're able to drag the opposition apart, create these sort of fluid transitions, fluid rotations, and create real instability in the opposition block. And it is the ability and having players that can sort of go across several zones that helps this. Again, I'll show you one more example. Here you've got Enzo Fernandez, who's dropping in and becoming that number 6. Yes, you've got Caicedo in close proximity, in case that ball is lost. You've also got Malo Gusto in the middle of the park. He's technically, if you was to put this as the diamond again, you've got Enzo Fernandez at the base, Caicedo and Palmer on the outsides, and then you've got Malo Gusto in the centre. But again, there's different reasons as to why this is helpful, because Enzo Fernandez is able to get his touches in a deeper area to dictate play and play through the lines. Malo Gusto, if that ball does break, you've got an athlete in the middle of the park who's ready to counter press and work really hard to win that ball back in dangerous areas. And you've also got an overload in the centre to allow that ball progression, which is what happens here. The ball goes into Malo Gusto, who can then turn and play out from there. So if we go back to the tactics board, it is these sort of movements that is really, really helpful. And if we look at it in sort of, this isn't all of the zones on the pitch, but if most managers will have their own sort of zonal occupations that they want players to sort of sit in. So if you look at Chelsea and the way that we played in this game, you've got the 3 defenders, you've got the 1 in the pivot, and then you've got the 2 half space players, and you've got another central player. Now, the different rotations that we've already seen in certain games allow for these sort of positions to change. Now, one of the main rotations that we just spoke about was Enzo Fernandez and Cucurella. Now, that moment where Cucurella sort of pushes into here and Enzo Fernandez can be in here or in one of these wider zones, it still connects to being a back 3. That is a terrible line, that last one. But what you've got is Enzo Fernandez, who is now on the ball, let's say, in one of his favourite zones facing forwards where he can then sort of play through the lines. He's got the option to go long, and if that ball does go long, you've now got Cucurella in here to win those second balls if it doesn't come off. So you've got the opportunity for Enzo Fernandez to do what he does best and create from deep. And if that doesn't come off, you've also now got a better placement of Cucurella for, let's say there's a defender here and they head the ball away. Cucurella is going to be first to react and he can keep that pressure on and sustain pressure. So it's these sort of things where you're getting 2 zonal sort of positives rather than just one. It's not like moving Enzo into here is a bad thing for Cucurella. That rotation is working in its own light for both players. And again, you can talk about the same on the other side. So Cucurella, let's put him back. Let's put Enzo back in here. If you do that on the other side of the pitch, let's say Gusto, who throughout this season, a lot of people have been annoyed at the inverted use of Gusto, but his ability to play inside allows someone like Nkunku or Cole Palmer to sort of, they can interchange positions. And at one point, you can see Cole Palmer drifting all the way over to here. You can see Nkunku in that sort of number 10 where he wants to be. And you can see Gusto, similarly to Cucurella, who can operate in that half space, especially when we're talking about if that ball then does break down, if Cole Palmer's trying to sort of go 1v1, sort of shift a little bit of space, create something to either put a cross in or cut inside or do something from there. If that ball is lost, you've got one of your better athletes, one of your better counter pressers, much like with Cucurella in this zone, who is ready to defend Cole Palmer and protect that space to sustain the pressure. And again, you get Nkunku into a better zone that he prefers. So it's these moments that allow players to get into their favourite zones whilst keeping that sort of structure that Maresca wants. As long as he's still got his 3 defenders, his or at least his 4 sort of block here, whether that's sort of 2-2 or whether it's a 3-1, he wants that block of 4 to be able to protect the transition. But then you've also got, he wants these sort of 3 players between the lines, but again, it can interchange who. It can even be João Pedro dropping in and one of those running in behind if it needs to be. It can even be an overload and sort of create this, which will then free up space for these players to sort of make the runs into the centre. But the idea is that you're trying to occupy all of these zones that the manager will speak about. Now, another way that Chelsea would do this usually is sort of, don't worry too much about the personnel for this one, but let's just put it like this. When you have that 3-2-5, and again, the idea is the same. It's the idea that if Gusto pushes up, and this is something we saw a lot last season towards the end, when Gusto and Enzo were playing on that right side together, you were seeing this movement quite a bit, where they sort of interchanged zones and allowed Enzo to get on the ball a little bit more in here and allowed Gusto to be in that sort of area, again, for the counter-pressing reasons and the athleticism, because he can run in behind as well, Gusto. He's got that ability, same as Cucurella. They've got that intensity to continuously make runs and be relentless. And it's this ability to occupy all of the zones, and it's a tactical understanding that allows you to level up. So moving on to PSG, and again, this is something Luis Enrique has got a lot of praise for using and adding that fluidity to his team this season. Coutinho spoke about it in interviews, and it is the understanding of every single player within the system that they know the role of not just their starting role, for example, but they know what they have to carry out if they find themselves in this zone or in this zone or in this zone or in this zone. They know the role and the occupation of every zone, not only on the ball, but off the ball as a huge example of that. And all of the players are versatile enough to, again, they operate at different heights. You've got Vitinha, who drops in often to sort of dictate play. But if Neves is going to drop in, Vitinha can find himself in that higher space and he can take players away with him. And he knows how to use those rotations to his sort of, what's the word? Sort of his positive, I can't think of the word now, but to help him and to help the team. Neves dropping into this area is then able to, again, use different parts of his game and he can carry the team forward. And it's this ability to interchange different depths and heights in midfield, but also with the fullbacks, that drags the Inter Miami team or any team they're against, the opposition block, around. So if we go on to a different example here, you can see Hakimi finds himself out holding the width on the right. Nuno Mendes finds himself in that left half space. Again, you've actually got Ruiz and Barcola deeper. You've got João Neves playing higher than Barcola, who's a winger. He's actually technically part of that pivot now, Barcola, if that ball breaks. And he knows that when that ball breaks, he has the responsibility to defend that area because that's where he's placed at the time. Vitinha in that left centre-back role, because that's allowed Nuno Mendes to push forward and use that athleticism to sort of get in the box. We've seen both Mendes and Hakimi use that on multiple occasions this season in the Champions League to their huge sort of, they've managed to score huge goals from that, which has helped them a lot. Again, if we use another example here, you can see the difference of players. You've got Fabian Ruiz basically as the centre forward. You've got Nuno Mendes in that higher position. So that means Kvaratskhelia, who's just behind him, whilst it's not naturally in shape because there's technically no left centre-back here because you've got these two pushed up a bit higher. But against Inter Miami, I think they realised that they could sort of push on a little bit more because they didn't have as much of an outlet with Suarez and Messi as the strikers. But Kvaratskhelia, again, he knows that he has to work back because Nuno Mendes isn't there. So he's going to have to work his socks off in here. And that's a collective understanding that the team already has. And Luis Enrique has really drilled that into his side. Again, another example, this time Hakimi out wide, Fabian Ruiz in there again. Nuno Mendes back in that left centre-back position. A bit more of a normal pivot with Neves and Vitinha. But it's this ability to interchange across zones that we spoke about in the Chelsea section that makes this team so good. And I think that the reason it works so well for PSG and what's going to be a challenge for Maresca and Arteta, who we're going to speak about, who's maybe got a little bit more of a foundation to do this with, is that on the ball, yes, you can get so much joy because you can get so many nice rotations. You've got so many technicians, Chelsea, Arsenal, PSG, Manchester City. You've got all these brilliant technicians in midfield and fullback and forwards who can drop in and they can play across all these zones because they're so good at football. But then what you need to know is that if Vitinha finds himself further forward, if Hakimi and Mendes are both push up in these half spaces, and Kvaratskhelia is actually the one, like, let's just sort of like put it like this, how it was. If it's Kvaratskhelia here and Vitinha there and Neves here, do you know, and let's push everybody up one, I guess, like this, do you know that you're going to get the same work ethic out of Kvaratskhelia in this zone, or is he going to let the team down and just let the game bypass him and allow you straight onto this back three, which is something that all managers don't want? But because Kvaratskhelia or Ousmane Dembele, who I've not even got on screen right now, or even Doué, whoever finds themselves in whichever zone they find themselves, they know the responsibility of that zone. So Kvaratskhelia, he knows the defensive responsibility of that zone. So does Mendes. So does Vitinha. And the movements don't only help them on the ball, but because they can trust what will happen off the ball, it allows for even more sort of fluidity. Some managers will only want a certain amount of fluidity to the players that they trust to sort of do that work ethic. So, for example, if you don't think Cole Palmer, who is showing that he can work hard, and he has always shown that he's quite a clever presser, but his actual work ethic has actually gone up a bit, in my opinion. But if you want to sort of pin somebody to one role, and you don't want them to be like really sort of involved in the pressing side of the game, then sort of that sort of locks off one zone. Because, for example, if that was Cole Palmer, or if that was, say, Mbappe on this left-hand side, you basically know that you can't really rotate with Mbappe because he's then not going to do, if he ends up in that zone there, the one that I've just put this bubble, here, he's not going to give you that same work ethic and use the defensive responsibility that he needs to use in that zone. So that's extremely important, and why this system can only work with complete buy-in from the players and tactical versatility amongst the players who can all operate across different zones. You don't want a fullback who can only operate in wide areas or like who sees themselves as a specialist and doesn't want to sort of do other things, because again, that locks off a zone. And you don't, with this positional fluidity, other than probably like your anchors, so your centre backs, and then maybe one midfielder, if say, again, Vitinha and Neves, they're quite fluid, but for example, Caicedo at Chelsea, you could say more of an anchor to stay in that role, then that's a little bit more normal to have those anchor positions centrally, but especially in these sort of attacking zones, these sort of 5 attacking zones here, and then even sort of these outside zones, you want more, that's where you want your fluidity to be able to drag the opposition block around. So that's extremely important when we're talking about zone replacement. And again, this is something that Mikel Arteta is trying to add at Arsenal, and there's other managers that I haven't even mentioned. Inzaghi, I made a whole zone replacement video on my channel nearly 2 years ago, I think it is, maybe a year and a half, about Inzaghi's Inter Milan and how they started that real wave of zone replacement. But Arsenal, another team that really have the foundations to do it because they're so well drilled defensively, and they have so many players that can operate across so many different zones of the pitch. Again, midfielders who can operate at lower heights and depths and higher heights and depths. So you've got Rice who can do both. You've got Ødegaard who can do both. You've got fullbacks who can operate in all different directions, invert, width, all these different areas. And it allows for the same level of zone replacement. So if we use an example from against PSV earlier in the year, you see Ødegaard dropping in deeper. You have Wanyeri, he was in for Saka at the time, pushing into that half space. And Timber is actually pushed on at playing with holding the width. Lewis Skelly is in the middle of the park. So you've got a lot of sort of rotations again on that one side of the pitch specifically. And it's something that Arteta can allow to do because even with Saka, if Saka drifts inside, Timber goes outside and Ødegaard sort of drops in to get on the ball here, then it allows you've still got that shape. Saka can sort of drift in to get on the ball, and you're still holding that shape, and it's got the structure. Again, Ødegaard, he will work hard off the ball. So if that ball breaks, he's willing to counter press, he's willing to track back. Same with Declan Rice, especially with Declan Rice. He's somebody who can cover so much ground. And then you've got Havertz, who can drop it to this area. Now, the question will be, is when you add the new players that they're looking at adding, Madueke, Eze, Gyökeres, already got Zubimendi in here, can they can they unleash another level of that with maybe Eze on the left, who can then allow sort of these rotations where Rice can drop in for sort of more defensive purposes at times. Eze can drift into here. Lewis Skelly can sort of operate in these wider channels. Maybe they'd want to add a more overlapping fullback to add to that sort of dynamic, so that it's not just on Lewis Skelly, who is a little bit more sort of comfortable in the middle of the pitch. But again, with Gyökeres in here, Gyökeres loves to drift out to the left as well. So if it is Rice, let's just put Martinelli back here. Let's put Lewis Skelly back here. If it's Rice in here, does Gyökeres sort of drift over into this channel to get on the ball, or even this channel as well, like this, like how he's sort of doing in here? And then does Rice actually use that to attack the box? He's got the frame. He's been using it this season. He's been adding goals to his game. Will he then attack that sort of central area? So again, it's adding, and a team like Arsenal have so much physicality already in all zones. They're all hard-working players. They're all put their body on the line. That's sort of the culture that Arteta has bred at Arsenal. He's looking to build a very similar thing where there's you can allow for that fluidity, because he trusts every single man in his team to do the job of whichever zone they find themselves in, which is kind of the theme of zone replacement and the video itself. Is, yes, it helps you a lot on the ball, but it only really works if you have the same buy-in off the ball from each player, if they find themselves in a zone that they're maybe not so much comfortable in, that is not their natural zone. So again, more so with the wingers especially, with the fullbacks, and obviously with the midfielders. So that is the absolute key when we're talking about zone replacement.